I got drunk that night without meaning to, 2 glasses of wine turning into 3, then 4. The house felt too quiet, the kind of quiet that sinks into your chest. Milo lay curled on the couch, his head resting lazily on his paws, watching me the way dogs do. There was something unsettling about how still he was, how his eyes followed me across the room like he knew something I didn't. Or maybe I was just drunk. Mark wasn't home. I hadn't expected him to be. Lately, he was always working late, or at least that's what he said. I never bothered to ask anymore. It was easier to pretend I didn't notice the way he avoided my touch, or how dinner conversations had boiled down to a few obligatory sentences before he disappeared into his office. It wasn't that we fought. We just stopped, and then there was Ava. I still remember the first time I kissed her, half laughing, half daring. She tasted like citrus and something sweeter underneath. It wasn't supposed to mean anything. I told myself that again and again, but it was a lie. It became our secret, something I carried in my chest like a warm coal. She was my best friend, the one who made me feel seen when Mark walked past me like I was furniture. I don't know when it shifted. Maybe it was always there, the need, the pull. It wasn't about Mark. It wasn't even about Ava. It was about the way I felt when I was with her. Light. Wanted. It was different from the weight of a marriage that felt more like a roommate arrangement. We kept it quiet. That was part of the thrill. Late nights, soft touches, laughter stifled behind closed doors. I convinced myself it wasn't wrong. Mark had already left me in every way that mattered. This was just something I needed, but even then, I wasn't naive. Guilt is a funny thing. It catches up to you in the quietest moments. The way Milo looked at me that night, head tilted like he was trying to understand why I smelled like someone else. Like he could sense it. I laughed at the thought. I poured another glass, feeling the warmth settle in my chest. I wasn't sorry. At least, that's what I told myself. If Mark didn't notice I was gone, was I really leaving? I reached down to scratch Milo's ears. You won't tell him, will you? He blinked. I exhaled slowly, staring at the reflection of myself in the dark window. It wasn't the lies that scared me. It was how easy they had become. I wasn't supposed to see the message. I was reaching for Mark's phone to silence the alarm when it lit up in my hand. Ava. Just her name, no last name needed. I stared at it for a second too long, the way you stare at something ordinary that suddenly feels like a threat. It wasn't the kind of message that should make your stomach drop, just a simple "I miss you." But it wasn't simple. I knew because it was the same thing she had texted me 2 days ago. My hands felt cold. I sat down on the edge of the bed, my breath slowing to something thick and shallow. It didn't make sense. Ava was mine. She wasn't supposed to be his, but the pieces were already falling into place. The late nights. The way he left the room to take calls. The way she looked at me sometimes, eyes soft with something close to pity. I hadn't noticed it before, but I could see it now, so clearly it made me feel stupid. I didn't cry. I just sat there, staring at his phone until the screen went dark. I could feel Milo watching me from the doorway, head tilted like he was waiting for me to react. I called Ava first. I told myself I wasn't angry. I was calm. Collected. But the moment she picked up, I could hear it in my own voice, that crackling edge of something I didn't want to name. Do you love him? I asked. No hello. No pretense. There was silence on the other end. A breath. 2. Lena, it's not, don't lie to me. Another pause. I didn't mean for it to happen. I laughed, sharp and bitter. That's what they always say. She started to explain, something about timing, how Mark was lonely, how it wasn't serious. But I wasn't listening. It was the way she said Mark was lonely, like that made it okay. Like I wasn't lonely too. I hung up before she could finish. The room felt too small, like the walls were closing in. I grabbed the half-empty bottle of wine from the kitchen counter and drank until the edges blurred. Milo followed me to the couch, curling up at my feet. I stared at him, laughing under my breath. "We're all liars," I whispered. "Even you." But Milo didn't blink. He just stayed. And for some reason, that made me cry harder. Mark came home late, smelling like cold air and someone else. I was sitting on the couch, the empty wine bottle tipped over on the coffee table, my head buzzing just enough to blur the edges of my anger. Milo lay at my feet, his breathing slow and steady. He'd been there all night, listening to me fall apart. Mark dropped his keys by the door and looked at me. "You're still up?" I stared at him for a second too long. "Where were you?" He sighed. The kind of sigh that says, "Don't do this." But I wasn't going to let him brush past me this time. I could see it in his face, the way he was already thinking of the right excuses, the right tone to make me feel crazy. "It's Ava, isn't it?" I asked. My voice was quiet. Tired. I wasn't looking for a fight. I just wanted the truth. Mark froze. I saw it in his eyes, that flicker of surprise, then guilt, then something calmer. He didn't even try to deny it. "How long? Does it matter?" I laughed. It sounded hollow. "I guess not." For a second, neither of us said anything. Milo shifted at my feet, his head lifting to glance between us. I could hear my own heartbeat, loud and slow. "I knew about you and Ava," Mark said finally. His voice was soft, like he thought it would hurt less if he whispered it. I figured it was fair. Fair. Like this was some kind of game. Like we were just trading wounds to keep the score even. I wanted to hate him for it, but I couldn't. I was too tired. "So this is what we are now?" I asked. "Just people who hurt each other." He sat down across from me, running his hands over his face. "I don't know what we are anymore." And there it was. The truth. We were two people sitting in the wreckage of something that used to matter, too stubborn to leave, but too broken to stay. The phone buzzed on the table. Ava's name. We both stared at it until it stopped. Neither of us moved to answer. Milo let out a soft sigh, resting his head back on his paws. He was the only one in the room who hadn't betrayed anyone. The only one who wasn't pretending to be something he wasn't. I leaned back, closing my eyes. I wasn't sure what hurt more, the betrayal or the fact that I wasn't surprised. Maybe this was just who we were now. People who loved each other badly. People who stayed because it was easier than leaving. Milo shifted closer, pressing his warm body against my leg. I reached down and stroked his fur, my chest tightening. At least someone was still loyal.